Coming up today, the UN Security Council puts North Korea on notice. It condemns the regime for its recent missile tests and threatens further action. The leaders of South Korea and the United States stress the importance of China's role in denuclearizing North Korea and implementing sanctions on the regime. Plus, South Korea's Hanjin Group is set to extend tens of millions of dollars to its ailing shipping arm to defuse a widening logistics crisis. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, September 7th here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. We are going to start with the global response to North Korea's latest provocation. The UN Security Council has strongly condemned the regime's recent ballistic missile launches as a grave violation of its international obligations. The Security Council unanimously adopted the press statement Tuesday after a closed-door emergency meeting was called to discuss how to respond to the threat posed by Pyongyang. The statement said all members, including the North's longtime ally China, were deeply concerned about the launches that were carried out in a flagrant disregard of its demands. It also threatened further significant measures against the North if the regime refuses to stop its nuclear and missile tests. The United States and South Korea both stressed the need for stronger sanctions and greater efforts to curb North Korea's aggression. The regime on Monday launched 3 medium-range ballistic missiles which landed in waters near Japan. President Park Geun-hye is in Laos for the ASEAN summit. Upon her arrival on Tuesday, the South Korean leader met with US President Barack Obama for talks that mostly centered around North Korea following its latest missile launches. They pledged all possible measures against such provocations, also mentioning the soon-to-be-deployed THAAD missile defense system as one important defensive element. Song Ji-son reports.
The allies vowed to rev up their defense capabilities and deterring power to suppress North Korea's nuclear proliferation, expressing Seoul and Washington's firm stance against Pyongyang's continued provocations.
한미 양국은 북한의 어떠한 도발에도 모든 수단을 다해서 강력히 대응해 나갈 것임을 분명히 밝혀둡니다. 북한은 어제 또 노동미사일을 발사했는데 이와 같이 무모한 도발을 지속하는 것은 자멸을 초래하는 길임을 강력히 경고합니다.
President Obama reiterated Washington's full commitment to protect its ally, stressing that North Korea's nuclear programs threaten not only South Korea and the U.S. itself, but also other allies like Japan.
In recent years, we've worked together to strengthen our alliance and to ensure our readiness against any threat. For instance, our missile defense cooperation. THAAD is a purely defensive system to deter and defend against North Korean threats.
The two sides also vowed to work together to make sure the latest UN sanctions are fully implemented. Recognizing the importance of China's role in resolving North Korea's nuclear issue, Seoul and Washington will enhance communication with Beijing through various channels. South Korea will also seek greater support from the U.S. and the international community to improve the human rights conditions in North Korea. The allies also discussed cooperation on new frontier sectors like space development and global issues like climate change, peacekeeping, refugees, and ODA. After having garnered Russia and China's commitment to implement the UN sanctions to denuclearize North Korea, and now backed by the cooperation and support of the U.S., President Park will sit down with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Wednesday. Song Ji-son, Arirang News, Vientiane.
Now, the nose cone and components inside the warhead of the 3 Rodong missiles launched by North Korea this week indicate some potential upgrades. Some analysts believe they may have been modified to improve launch accuracy. Connie Kim with the details.
The ballistic missile fired by North Korea on Monday was an upgraded version of a medium-range Rodong missile and flew on the same trajectory as the previous Rodong missiles fired by the regime. That's according to a government source on Tuesday who compared pictures of the missiles released by the North's official Rodong Sinmun. It's the first time a Rodong missile with a modified warhead has been identified. Comparing the warheads of the latest missile and the one fired in July, the nose cone of Monday's resembles a short-range Scud with a pointier tip. Another source has claimed the missiles could actually have been short-range Scud missiles modified to have a longer range. While Seoul has not confirmed the reports, some claim the missiles look no different from earlier Rodong missiles but could have different components inside the warhead.
The warhead of the Rodong missile doesn't look like it's been changed, but there is high possibility the North changed the inner system to improve its accuracy rate.
North Korean media on Tuesday hailed the ballistic missile launch as a success, also saying Kim Jong-un, who was present at the launch site, vowed that the regime will continue to develop its nuclear capabilities. Most North Korea watchers in Seoul say the possibility of future North Korea provocations has escalated as it fired 3 ballistic missiles at the same place on Monday, showing off its accuracy and ratcheting up tensions another notch. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, with the threat of North Korea always looming in the background, the South Korean government has announced plans to increase its defense budget for next year. For the first time, it exceeds the 40 trillion won mark. That is nearly $37 billion. For more on how the funds will be used, Oh Jang-hee reports.
South Korea has increased its defense budget for next year by 4%, beefing up missile defense capabilities amid growing nuclear and missile threats from the north. The Ministry of National Defense announced on Tuesday the government has set an unprecedented amount of more than 40 trillion won for defense. That translates to roughly $36.5 billion. Of that, around $11 billion will be spent to improve the country's weapon systems, a 4.5% increase from this year's budget. South Korea is developing its own missile defense systems, namely the Korea Air and Missile Defense System, or KAMD, and a kill chain system, both of them expected to be deployed by 2020. And $1.4 billion will go into these projects. The budget for KAMD rose by 40.5%, topping $480 million. KAMD is being designed to tackle missiles flying at low altitudes of less than 40 kilometers, as opposed to the THAAD system, which targets high-altitude missiles. On the other hand, the budget for the kill chain dropped by 8% to over $1 billion, as it is on its final stage of development. Through these two, Seoul expects to identify and preemptively destroy Pyongyang's missiles before they're launched. For the LSAM system, which aims at intercepting ballistic missiles flying at altitudes between 50 and 60 kilometers and currently being developed as part of the KAMD projects, the government allocated $103 million, which is a 3-fold increase from the budget this year. But the biggest increase is found in the country's ongoing development of homegrown combat jets, known as the Korea Fighter Experimental or KFX program, which rose to $270 million, or about 4.5 times the amount this year. Oh Jang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, more than 50%, half of Hanjin Shipping's fleet has been halted as it slipped into court-led restructuring last week. The shipper's parent company, Hanjin Group, is swooping in to provide significant financial support. Kim Min-ji reports.
Hanjin Group says it plans to extend roughly $90 million to its ailing shipping arm currently under court receivership to defuse a widening logistics crisis. The group says the decision was made to minimize the fallout for exporting and importing firms, and that 40% of the financial support will come from the chairman's private assets. Earlier in the day, the government and the ruling party agreed to extend low-rate loans to Hanjin worth over $90 million if the group agrees to put up collateral. They also agreed to help the shipping firm secure entry rights at ports and seek stay orders in over 40 countries to keep creditors from seizing its vessels. The Fisheries Ministry says nearly 300 port-related firms are expected to be hit directly or indirectly from the collapse of Hanjin Shipping, affecting more than 11,000 workers.
We will monitor the situation at subcontractors and importing and exporting firms on a daily basis and provide customized financial support after one-on-one consultations.
More than 70 Hanjin ships are currently stuck in irregular operating conditions. Most of the vessels are stranded at sea, while about a dozen have been banned from loading and unloading at ports in fear the company won't be able to pay related fees. As a result, some 800 people are estimated to be on stranded ships. Hanjin has received approval to use emergency funds to supply daily necessity for a handful of those vessels for now. Facing this logistics chaos, the government says Hyundai Merchant Marine, the country's #2 shipper, has agreed to deploy 13 ships to cover some of Hanjin's transit routes. 4 Hyundai vessels will run on American routes, while the remainder will support shipments to Europe. Meanwhile, the government will expand an incentive program for transshipment cargo to prevent the volume from falling in the wake of the crisis. Roughly $9 million will be used to support shippers that make transfers in Korea's southern port city of Busan and Gwangyang Port in Yeosu, such as covering costs that arise from transshipment within container terminals, as well as establishing new routes to transfer at those ports. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The Chief Justice of Korea's Supreme Court has issued a public apology for a recent corruption scandal involving a senior judge. As the investigation unfolds, Korea's political parties have agreed to discuss a bill to reform the nation's prosecution. Ji Myung-gil with the details.
Chief Justice Yang Seung-tae offered a public apology on Tuesday during an emergency meeting of lower court chiefs. It was the first apology by a Korean Chief Justice in 10 years. The apology followed the arrest last week of a sitting senior judge on charges of taking bribes from the former head of a local cosmetics company.
I offer my deepest apologies to the people and promise to take strict measures as the case unfolds.
Chief Justice Yang added that in view of the seriousness of the charges, the judiciary will take meaningful action as more details come out. Last Friday, the Seoul Central District Court issued a warrant to arrest Judge Kim Soo-chun of the Incheon District Court over suspicions he accepted roughly $153,000 worth of money and gifts from Chung Woo-no, the former CEO of Nature Republic. The return for the bribes, Chung allegedly asked Judge Kim to hand down heavy sentences to cosmetics makers who distributed fake Nature Republic products. In the aftermath, Korea's opposition parties have pushed for the establishment of an independent investigative body to oversee prosecutors.
The prosecution is the only organization that remains unfettered in its exclusive prosecutorial power. Reform is essential to crack down on corruption.
The minor opposition People's Party echoed that view, and the ruling Saenuri Party agreed to jointly discuss the prosecutorial reform bill in Parliament's Legislation and Judiciary Committee. If the bill is approved, it would enable the supervisory agency to carry out investigations and indict corrupt senior public officials, including prosecutors and judges. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, with the US presidential election just over 60 days away, the race to the White House has tightened sharply. A joint poll by CNN and polling agency ORC shows Hillary Clinton leading Donald Trump by a mere 3 percentage points with 44% among registered voters. But among likely voters, Trump leads 45% to Clinton's 43%. As the margin of error is plus or minus 3.5%, analysts say the two rivals are in a statistical dead heat. What's more, among independents not affiliated with either Democratic or Republican parties, the poll found Trump is ahead by a whopping 20 percentage points, with 49% support suggesting that Clinton's post-convention bump has evaporated. Well, that's all we have for now on this Wednesday morning here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for tuning in to our newscast. We'll be back with our next bulletin at 10 a.m. Korea time. So until then, goodbye.